Let me give you a very clear, let's say, simplistic starting point for this. Every investment in a new autoroute, in a new highway, needs to be questioned because it should be an investment in public transport. Every investment in terms of a new development, housing development in the suburban area should be questioned. Why don't you intensify and make it a more livable habitat in the city center? How do you make it so that people can walk and bicycle to things, but rather than having to take a car to go to the next supermarket? These are very, very basic things. The architecture of a city, the kind of urban planning you have, is the grammar of emotions in the experience of an urban person living there day by day, raising their children and families and growing and dying there. That is, this kind of grammar needs to be restructured. The syntax needs to be reorganized. The semantics need to be optimized and made much more human-like rather than car-like. And that is a real challenge for any kind of city in Canada or in the US or in many other countries. I can see it very much how the transformation of Chinese cities, from going from a rickshaw all the way to an electric car. You are in a car, you are an individualized automobile situation. And that is something which you should reconsider because it makes a great, great difference in terms of your understanding of community, in terms of the location and space you have, in terms of how you care for your environment and so on. You care for your environment differently when you have a car because you want to have the car run smoothly over a good asphalt or concrete street. If you walk, you can have a very different kind of surface. You can have much more flower pots. You can have many, many more trees around it and so on. And that is something when you look at heat zones in cities in the north, or flooding zones, on the equator, that is something you need to look at. And so it's very, very concrete. Digital plays an important role in this because digital makes us much more able to be independent of location and space in terms of many things which we do, work, entertainment, communication, and community. But we need to basically see that we use this freedom for something which is positive. If we use the freedom to live, the same way now than we did in the 60s and 70s, and basically turn only our carports to the city street and not our verandas, we are basically closing ourselves off and blinding ourselves in terms of the community which we live in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Listening to you from coming to us from the center of great social experiments, that's how I think of Austria. That's how I think of Vienna, and all of the things that I learned with visiting and WSA for Smart Social Vienna, understanding the history of the 15-minute communities, like the origins of that in Vienna, so that everything was walkable, bikeable, and people really had that sense of interpersonal relationships, but also that infrastructure support that you're talking about. Where is Austria now? Have you made advances on that history?
We have a government at the moment where we have a very strong presence of the Green Party. And to give you a very simple, example is that we have a so-called climate ticket now. And that is a ticket I pay now 900, somebody else might pay 1,200 euros for the entire year to use any kind of public transport all over Austria, unlimited, 24/7. That means I walk out of my door here in Salzburg, get onto a bus. I can go to the railway station, take a train to Vienna, get on the subway there, go and blah, 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 and so on. I never have to think about even getting a ticket. I can go skiing to the Arlberg, I can go swimming to the Wörthersee, doesn't matter. Wherever I go, I have one ticket for 1 year, unlimited, everywhere, anywhere. That means that you have a completely different situation in terms of mobility. What Vienna has done is to put smart city and social city together, to put smart city, social city, and cultural city together, to put smart city, social city, cultural city, and community city together. You start to have a real sense of a revival of neighborhoods in Vienna over the last 20 years. People start to identify again with where they are, not just in terms of the entire city, but in terms of the 5 blocks which belong to each other. And it's not, it used to be that the church was maybe the center, but now it's maybe a theater, or maybe it's a kind of street where there's a lot of restaurants and cafes and things like this, and where there's your community and your kindergarten and your school and your working environment and your shoemaker and possibly somebody who is cleaning your laundry. That is something which is really helpful. And you don't need a car. You walk and you go by bicycle. And that is not something which is ideological, but it's practical. And what WSA tries to do is it tries to see how you melt into this transformation, the perspective and the vision that it is not just good for you, but it gives you additional freedoms. It adds to your dignity. It adds to your respect for others, and it makes you basically having a better life. And that is something which many people don't see. Many people don't see. They see, oh, my car is my freedom. No, your car is your burden because you're stuck in traffic for an hour and a half on the way to work. If you would take public transport and you would go in Toronto by the GO train, it would be different. You would be at work not in 1 hour and a half, but in 45 minutes. And that's a saving of an hour and a half every day going back and forth. And that matters. It helps your family. It helps your relationships. It helps your cultural activities. So let's be realistic about this. And the car is not a problem in itself, but it's the way it structures your life. That is what the problem is.